Welcome to Access Zen with Gregory Foster. Our program will help you set a more perfect balance between your inner world and the outside world. And now, here's your host, Gregory Foster.
And good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing today on a beautiful Thursday? We're heading into the middle of the month, and what a month it's been. So today's show, we've got an incredible show, but before we do that, let's take a moment and read something from our friend Craig Renwick that I think will fit the show nicely. It's titled, "The Fuse is Lit." Craig says, "I would like to take a moment to quote from one of my favorite spiritual writers, Eknath S. Warren. If you are not familiar with this wonderful professor, I highly recommend his writings." His quote, "So much energy is spent on trying to rise above the fray in order to understand our place in our own lifetime. We are also bound by the limitations that time places on our body and mind. With the fuse lit when we are born, we most of the time fail to see the lit fuse until there is very little of it before we combust from this world to the next. I know that may seem difficult to do, but try to recognize that your fuse is lit, not to create a heightened sense of urgency, but to enhance the quality of each moment, to elevate the presence of each day from a series of mundane moments to a cavalcade of joy." I'm Gregory Foster, your host, and you're listening to Access Zen. Last week we talked about health, and I'm going to wrap that up in just a second, give you some neat things that we took away from last week's show. But on this week's show, it's all about making your career dreams come true. So we've gone from focusing on your health to focusing on the health of your career. You're going to be listening to David Couper. He's a very successful, world-renowned executive coach, and he's authored about 8 books. Most recently, a really interesting title. Listen to this. It's basically Outsiders on the Inside, How to Create a Winning Career Even When You Don't Fit In. So that's going to make for some very interesting conversations. So we'll basically be talking about how do we find our Zen, our place of balance, our place of peace, while we're going through a career search. And it might be, a variety of situations. Could be, we're currently employed, unhappy with our current situation for some reason, and want to move into something else. Or it could be we're unemployed and we're looking for work and we're stressed out because we can't find something and we don't feel like we fit into the mold. Or it could be a student getting ready to graduate, like my beautiful wife, and getting ready to go out to the job market and facing all those stresses and pressures. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that in just a few moments. But just wrapping up from last week's show, again, all about health, to your health, lean, clean, and serene, with the wonderful Dr. Vicky and Dr. Yonda. And we kind of talked about how to keep our life in balance from a structural perspective, from a supplemental perspective, and from a nutritional perspective. And I thought both had very compelling, points of perspective. And I talked about some of the challenges that I had when I was suffering from, some of the pain and situations. And again, pain-free, and my life is wonderful. So I just can't recommend enough, no matter where you are in the country or the world, find yourself a wonderful, holistic chiropractor who focuses on those 3 components: nutrition, supplements, and structural health, well-being. Acupuncture, someone who's got a great background in all of those areas, and I guarantee you'll be very well rewarded. So I wanted to just give a shout out to Dr. Vicky. We mentioned it on the last show. She's got a 5-day health camp, and that includes room and board and all your meals and all of the activities. And I know she's got a lot of wonderful folks going to be working with her. Co-host, she met Dr. Yonda. Not that he'll be participating, but it'll be folks of his caliber. So let me just read this to you real quickly, and then we'll get into our show for the week. So the daily programs will include sunrise walks, and I forgot to mention, her camp is being held at Garden Oasis in Palm Springs. And I know all of you have been out there. It's absolutely breathtaking, especially this time of year. So the daily programs that she has, again, it's 5 days, and they'll include sunrise walks on panoramic high desert trails, meditation, Pilates, yoga, stretching, spinal stabilization classes, cooking, preparation, how to prepare organic foods with informative lectures on nutrition, and lifestyle planning. It'll be a great opportunity to meet other like-minded folks that want to improve the quality of their life and make new friends. So if you would like to reach out to her and participate in the camp, her phone number is 949-574-9311. If you want to sign up for her 5-day health camp. So our show today is all about managing our career. And I want to talk a little bit about David Couper. As we talked about at the top of the hour, he has done a lot of great work as a career coach and as a consultant and a writer for the last 20 years in Europe, Asia, and the United States, working with major organizations including the BBC, Fuji Television, Mattel, Sony, and Warner Brothers. So give a beautiful welcome to David Couper. David, how's it going this morning?
Fine. How's it going with you, Gregory?
Fantastic. And now you're in California, correct?
Right. I'm in Los Angeles, but originally from England, but now happy in sunny Los Angeles.
Yeah, sunny, warm Los Angeles. Let's keep it that way, shall we?
Yeah.
So a very interesting job title. And before we get into that, tell us a little bit about. I gave you a little bit of a snapshot on your background, but tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you got involved in writing books and executive coaching. I know you've written like 8 other books as well, and give us kind of a synopsis of that.
Sure. So I've been working with large companies and individuals for about 20 years. I started off in Japan, worked in my native UK, and then came to the States. And I was doing a lot of training development, and then gradually I got the opportunity to work with different individuals, coaching them. And what I love to do is work with people who are successful but feel like they're kind of stuck, they're not happy, they're not fulfilled, and they're really not quite sure what direction they should go, what should be next in their career. And I love kind of helping them work through that, get kind of more peaceful with where they are, and move on to their next, either their next career or the next level in their job, or whatever works for them. And I've worked with everybody from people earning $7 an hour in a bottling factory, bottling beer, to CEOs making 7 figures. So worked with all kinds of different people. It's been great fun.
That's great. That's wonderful. So did the other 8 books also deal with this topic or other topics?
Yeah, so I've written kids' books as well, so those are a little different, but nice. I've also written books about counseling in the workplace, conflict, management development topics. So things which are aligned with this. And then the kids' book were just fun. I started off my career teaching English in Japan, so I've written books for teenagers and kids early in my career.
Wow, so I'm sure that recent events have really kind of touched you since you did spend some time there. I did read that in your book.
Yeah, I know the areas where it happened, and it's really, really quite scary and quite fantastic. But that's what's happening. Just amazing. What
part of Japan were you in, and for how long were you there?
I lived there for 4 years, and I was in Tokyo, in Yokohama, and then I was also in Kyoto, which is the old capital. And Kyoto is very close to Kobe, where the previous earthquake was. So if you go to Kobe, it's very modern. Very little of the old Kobe exists. So I've kind of seen that, and I've been in earthquakes. I've been in earthquakes in LA, but also earthquakes in Japan, but obviously nothing like this one. And the tsunami, never experienced that, thank goodness.
So, I know you kind of just gave us a brief overview, and we're going to be taking a break here in just a couple minutes. But when we come back from the break, I want to get into some of the meaty things, and I'm going to read those to the listeners because I I really feel like the stuff that you've written about in this book, this is not just your normal career book. Is that right?
No, I'm certainly not. I kind of like to think that I'm unique and I give unique information for unique people. And my career book is not the same as other books, and the advice I give, I like to kind of turn kind of normal advice on its head and give stuff which is different. And I base that on my experience with hundreds, thousands of people, and then also I've been a vice president, I've been a senior manager hiring people myself, so I've seen what works in job search, in careers. So I kind of have both perspectives.
Well, they tell me that the demographics for this show are a lot of professional folks and students. So that's kind of why I mentioned, at the top of the hour, there's lots of different people going through a job search, but that really isn't the only dynamics that are going on, right?
No, for sure. And there's, I work a lot with people who already have a job and are looking to do something different. I mean, there's statistics like this year, I think it's 70% of people want to change jobs. I mean, that's a huge number of people who are not satisfied with their job. And then you have all the people who are unemployed. And it's not just people mid-level or students, but it's also seniors who find that they have to go back to work because they need the money, or parents who've been looking after kids who have to go back to work. So a variety of different people for sure. And for students, it's especially tough right now because they're kind of competing with some of the people who have more experience, and it's very tough for students right now. So because of the last couple of years with the recession, a new graduate is kind of competing with the people who graduated the year before and the year before that. So it's tough.
So it's just kind of a compounding factor.
Right. So those people who graduated a couple of years ago have a little bit more experience. They still get the same salary. So it's tougher. And so my book is all about stressing what makes you different and making that a unique kind of selling proposition if you think about marketing. So especially as a student, you have to really stress what makes you different from other people. Yeah, you have to be able to do the job, but then you have to really stress what makes you different, what makes you unique. So that's my deal.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm going to give a quick quote, and then we're going to take a break. You say, a successful outsider is about not fitting in. Find a company that loves your unique talents and qualities. So on that, we're going to take a pause. I'm Gregory Foster, and you're listening to Access Zen.
And now, let's return to Access Zen.
All right, and we're back. So I'm with David Couper, author of How to Create a Winning Career Even When You Don't Fit In, Outsiders on the Inside. So I kind of left David with a tantalizing quote. I said, a successful outsider is about not fitting in. Find a company that loves your unique talents and qualities. You want to comment on that, David?
Yeah, for sure. So I love that quote too, because if you think about lots of successful business people, you think about Steve Jobs or any of those people, they didn't really fit in, but they found somewhere where their talents were recognized. So I think the worst thing is if you're trying to be like everybody else, you're trying to not be yourself, you're kind of a pale imitation of everybody else, it doesn't work very well. But if you can find either the right company or the right team or the right manager to help you be yourself, it's a completely different story. I know that from my own experience. I worked for the same company in London and in Chicago. In London, it was a disaster. In Chicago, I won a couple of awards. I was earning twice as much money, doing exactly the same job. But in Chicago, they recognized what I could do, and in London, they didn't need what I could do.
Well, let's explore this a little bit, because I think this is a really juicy topic. So you go on to say how people are often judged by how they look or act instead of embracing their unique talents and skills. You mentioned guys like Steve Jobs. I would also throw out there Bill Gates and Paul Allen, and I'm sure our listeners could find dozens of folks that fit this category. People who didn't fit that corporate cookie-cutter mode of, fitting into the culture of that specific company, right?
Right. And
go ahead.
There's a lot of research about how CEOs of companies, it sometimes makes sense to bring in an outsider. There's actually been some research about that, and there's even a book about that, how if you have an insider taking over the company, you kind of end up with more of the same. But if you want to have a dramatic change, you have to bring in somebody from the outside.
Right, and I've noticed, looking at the preparation, this starts pretty young, right? Like my wife is about to graduate college, and she's a part of some networking group, and I've noticed that, even, while they're still in school and she has to go to these certain events, that they're all about, we have to dress a certain way, and you have to talk a certain way, and you have to be a certain way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep, for sure. Yeah, graduates these days are very smart and know kind of how to play the game and what the rules are, but sometimes I think they lose perspective on, what makes you different, what makes you unique, and they think they have to be like everybody else. So I just work with a bunch of new graduates who are all working for an accounting firm, and they're all really different. They all have different strengths. So if they're smart, they'll sell those differences, sell what makes them unique from other people, and make that their kind of winning formula for their career.
Yeah, you mentioned how they look, how they sound, how they act, and then how they feel on the inside, right?
Right. And then the last one is how other people make you feel different. So you may think you're just like everybody else, but then people are kind of pointing stuff out which is different, or, teasing you if you're at school, that kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so these are all the fun things you get to look forward to, kids, as you get ready to go to school.
Yeah.
And and maybe it speaks volumes to your statistics you gave us at the top of the hour. You said did you say 70% of the people are unhappy with their current job?
Yeah, that's the low end. I mean, I've seen statistics where it's like 80% of people are not happy in their job. I mean, it's just there's 70% who want to change their job this year. So that means something's not right about it. It could be they want more money. It's usually not that they necessarily want more money. It's usually the main reason people leave a job is they don't like their manager, they don't like the organization. That's usually why people leave. People think it's because of money, but it's not. The statistics don't say that. It's they leave because of the manager, and that's all about feeling kind of wanted and feeling part of the organization, feeling valued.
Yeah. So your book really kind of rings true for myself, and I know we've talked about Steve and Bill and Paul, Bill Gates and all those folks, but it's kind of interesting when I look at like the most successful people in my company, working at Sprint in the sales organization, and it's really the folks that have the most unique perspective on life, who seem to be like the most creative, who really in a sense, you can tell probably outside of work, they probably really don't fit in to the culture, but they seem to be the most successful people. Can you give a reason for why that would be?
Well, I think it's kind of matching what you have with what people need. But you touched upon creativity. Companies who do the same thing over and over, like IBM used to be. Companies who got stuck in, or the phone companies before. 20 years ago, all were doing the same things, no creativity, they get stuck. So if you have somebody who's a little different, who thinks out of the box, who challenges the way things are, they're likely to be more successful. Now, they might be very different at home, but I know an example of someone, a senior manager, who very successful in his career. He's moved up starting out, within about 6 years, he's gone from entry level to being a VP, and he's very different. He's an artist. He's hasn't graduated high school, all kinds of different things. But what he does in meetings, what he does in strategy kind of planning, things like that, he'll think of the ideas that other people don't. So kind of challenge people. So it's interesting, and his level, most of the people don't do that. Most people kind of go, well, we've done it this way, we'll keep doing it. But he comes up with his different ideas. But in his home life, he's very different from them. So yeah, it's true what you're saying.
So it's about maintaining our own personal identity and maybe adapting, being like the Romans, giving them, paying their taxes, but still being ourselves and finding a way inside that environment to be successful, right?
Right, exactly. I think people get a little confused because I work a lot with people who are really unhappy. I mean, people who can be very successful in their careers. So I work a lot with entertainment clients and be very successful, making a lot of money, but hate their job. But they think that, they are different, but they have to be different in all ways, or it doesn't work. So I had someone who, she kind of dressed like a hippie. She's in her 50s. She was a hippie. Now she's an executive. It doesn't work. That's not a unique thing that people are going to be buying into very much, unless you're in the fashion business or something.
Right.
So I kind of think that you want, just as you said, you want to stress what makes you unique, but then you kind of tailor it to what the company needs. I see it like a painting with a frame. So when the Impressionists were painting, or even abstract painters, most of the time the frames are pretty traditional. They don't kind of go out there, very wacky frames. A frame is a frame, but the picture is different. So it's kind of like your essence of who you are. You get comfortable with who you are. You get to be at peace with who you are. But the frame, like what you wear normal business dress. There's no reason not to, because that's the kind of the frame. So you don't want to fight. You don't want to fight the wrong things. You want to fight for who you are, the essence of who you are, not kind of the way you look, the way you kind of dress, the things which are less important.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The other thing I wanted to mention is, you mentioned 70% of the folks are unhappy, and they, as you said, they may, be unhappy with their relationship with their boss, or feeling like they're not fitting in or not making enough money. But I do want to remind the listeners that we often say this on the show: outer reality reflects inner experience, right?
For sure, yeah. So if you're not happy with your boss, it's probably something to do with you not being happy with yourself. I guess that's what you're saying. And that's kind of my first step with going from an outsider to being a successful insider, is kind of acknowledging who you are. So a lot of people don't want to accept that they're different from other people. They want to be like everybody else. So that could be, because you sound different, you look different, whatever. They don't want to own that. And that's
so it creates a struggle, right? Creates kind of a fight.
Yeah. So you create that fight, and then I believe, as you probably do, that you then get people showing up in your life who kind of make that struggle even tougher. They kind of are kind of like teachers for you. So I've had that myself personally with bosses who I haven't worked well with, because I wasn't happy with myself, and they were just kind of reflecting my own unhappiness. So if you can get happy with who you are and internally get at peace with that, you're much more likely to have bosses who reflect that peace.
Yeah, that's a great point. So folks out there, work with yourself first, whether you're looking to change careers, looking to get rehired, or if you're a college student getting your first job. Work with yourself as your starting point. Get centered within yourself and make sure you're clear before you start to go out and look for the right place to work, right?
Exactly, yeah. And if you don't, you'll end up with, I've had clients who have been working in a job for 20 years, really hate it, and work with them, and the first thing I ask them to do is, like, what would your dream job be like? Forget about money, forget about where you live, forget about everything. What would your dream job be like? And they say, I had a client, well, when I was a kid, I always played with building, and I was always, designing houses, and that's what I really love. So, well, that sounds like an architect, so why are you an engineer? So, well, my dad told me I should be an engineer. And, my dad told me, well, the advisor at school said, because you were good at math, you should do this. So, well, they're not the ones who are going to be living your life. You're the one who's going to be living your life. So that particular person, she went back to college, trained, got some experience. Now she's an architect restoring old houses. That was her passion. That's what she wanted to do as a kid. So you kind of have to stop and, what's really right for me? What is my life's purpose? Not what other people tell me to do. I have another client who is a teacher now, but she was told all her life, don't be a teacher because teachers don't make any money. Well, it's great if you're making money, but if you're miserable and when Friday comes, you're dreading Monday, that's not really a great way to live. So she's a teacher, and she's really happy, and she makes enough money. It's fine.
David, this is a fascinating conversation. It's all about making your career dreams come true. I'm Gregory Foster. You're listening to Access Zen.
And now, let's return to Access Zen.
And we're back. I'm Gregory Foster, your host, and you're listening to, of course, Access Zen. And we're in the middle of a great discussion with David Couper about making your career dreams come true. We're kind of getting into some deeper context of, when you're looking for a job, you want to match yourself up with the right company, and sometimes even if when you're inside of a company, you may feel like an outsider, right, David?
Exactly, yeah, right.
I wanted to read a quote, another quote from your book, and then we're going to get into some of the chapters of your book so that folks can maybe learn some tools for how to work with themselves if they feel like, maybe they're in this category. And let's face it, a lot of us are, especially as 70% of the folks out there are unhappy with their job. This would be a great first step to take an inventory. So in your book, you say, even though on the surface you might look and act just like everyone else at work, inside you may feel like an outsider. Your worldview of lifestyle may be different. Tell us about that.
Yeah, for sure. So that's what is sometimes surprising to people, because they're acting as if they're successful. Well, they are successful, but inside it's not working for them. So I had someone who's a successful executive, and she just was really unhappy. Now, you wouldn't have known that from talking to her, but it kind of came out in, not really a healthy lifestyle, kind of being very stressed, a little depressed, things like that. But at work, she making good money, looked like it was working out. But she hadn't really acknowledged that actually she was an artist and she's a sculptor. And that's really what's her passion. So once she acknowledged that's what she was about, then she was able to change from that job and kind of create a new career. So if people think that, outsiders means that you're somebody who's failing. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It could be someone who's very successful but just not happy with themselves inside.
That's just a great point. And I think in reading your book, you kind of open up talking about your own experiences that you had when you felt like you weren't fitting in, right?
Right, exactly, yeah. So, and if you're not listening to your heart and you're not really at peace with that, then it can be very tough. So I work for a large consulting firm in London, and I just felt very different. I just dressed differently. I seemed to, all the things I was interested in, nobody else seemed to be interested in, and my boss, who was, there was nothing wrong with him, he wanted something completely different from what I could deliver. So, it came to a head when he told me, you have a career-limiting tie. And it was kind of like brighter and more out there than most of the other guys in the office. And I thought he was joking, but he wasn't really joking. So my tie was kind of like hanging me. And so I left, and then I got offered some work for the same company, but in Chicago. And that was when I went there, and what I could give them was exactly what they wanted. So in London, they want someone who's really good with administration, really kind of detailed and organized, and that's not really my strongest part. And in Chicago, they want someone who's much more creative, who could come up with different ideas, and that was totally me. So that was when I did very well, won a couple of awards for work I did. I was making a lot more money. So it was, and at the time, I didn't really know what was the difference. So I spent the last 10 years kind of working out, well, how do you identify what makes you different? So in the book, I give you kind of like different tools to go through, well, what makes me different? And then really thinking about yourself as a product, and selling and marketing yourself to employers. What are they looking for? So I give kind of lots of different tips about making sure that what you're offering is going to fit what people need.
So before and we're going to get into that, and I'm going to read a couple of chapters here because I think it's some really great stuff. But when you took that first job, and there's lots of folks listening who are in the same situation, clearly when you first took that job, you had a different perception of what it was going to be like, and you went there and you were just being yourself. You were wearing your own tie, and I've noticed in my own job place, folks, there's like this little peer pressure group on, ooh, you're wearing that, and I'm always like, relax, be yourself,
Yeah, yeah, and it's not to blame anybody else. It's really my own deal, and when I look back at it, actually, I knew when I took the job, it wasn't really the job for me. When I went there, I was like, I don't know, this, my politics, what I like to do out of work, who I am, the way I dress, it all feels kind of different to everybody else here. And I knew that almost as soon as I walked into the door of the office. But I was paying pretty good money. It was a job. It seemed like a good thing. And I thought I could make it work for me. And, I didn't listen to my heart, really. So that was a big learning for me, to listen to that. And then the other thing is, to, just as you said, to kind of relax and like, well, yeah, I am different. That's okay. But here's what I can offer you. Do you want that? If you do, I can do great things for you, and be kind of confident in who you are. I think now, 15 years later, I could take that a lot differently, because I would be able to be more sure of who I was and accept who I am, and not try to be like other people. But at the time, I was much younger, and it was really important to fit in.
It is, and I think it still is today. So in the first chapter, and so this is for the listeners out there, take a good listen to this. In your first chapter, it says, "Are you a workplace outsider?" And it basically, the first chapter defines workplace outsiders, explains 5 standout signifiers, and identifying workplace eccentrics. Tell us about that.
So it gives you different ways you can check to see whether you're an outsider, and there's also a kind of a short, easy assessment to see whether you're an outsider. Things like, do you eat lunch by yourself? Do you eat lunch with other people? If you're eating lunch by yourself, that could be something that you're standing outside. And some of the signifiers are, looking different. So when I worked in Japan, I was the only non-Japanese person working in my office. I was completely, I stood out. So people would, as I was walking, I'm also quite tall, I'm 6'2". So as I was walking along, people would say, "Oh, takai desu ne," which means that you're tall. I thought it meant hello first for a while. But people would say, that's how they greet me. "Oh, wow, you're so tall." So I really stood out that way. Or "You sound different." I'm English, so people would kind of make fun of my accent. And in the book, I also talk about ways to kind of get over that. So when people make fun of my accent, I'll kind of lay it on even more thickly. And just kind of, okay, if you want to make fun of it, I'm going to make fun of it too. I'm not going to get serious about it, because it's not that important to me. What's important about me is who I am, not my accent. So those are some of the signifiers, yeah.
And one of the things that I would say that might give an indication that you're in the right place, even if you don't necessarily fit in, is, do folks ultimately adjust to you? Mm-hmm. Or do they become accepting of you? They look at you more for who you are and how you perform, right? If you're in that kind of situation, even if you're still not quite perfectly fitting into their mold, I have seen where folks really, it doesn't matter after a certain point, right? Right.
And that's what happened with me. In London, my boss said I had a career-limiting tie. And then in Chicago, my new boss said he liked my socks and they were bright red. And I was still in kind of a corporate environment. So it was kind of like, he liked that different. He thought that was kind of fun. Whereas the other boss thought it was a problem. So you get little signs that, okay, what I'm doing is good. And you're exactly right. People come to you as an expert or respect what you do. Respect what you do rather than how you present yourself.
Yeah, and I just want to encourage our listeners, always be yourself. Pay attention to the environment that we're in, but it's really important, as David says, follow your heart, be yourself first, be grounded in that, and then make your adjustments, right?
Exactly, yeah. And what's interesting is that people think, if I'm myself, then it's going to be a problem, and I'm going to get fired, and blah blah blah. And I have a client who makes nearly 7 figures, and she was saying, I'm talking to my boss, and I feel like I don't know what to say to him, and I'm worried about what he's going to think. And then we talked through it and said, you have to say what's on your mind. You have to say what's coming from your heart, because that's what he wants from you. And so the next time we talked, she'd done exactly that. She'd gone back to what was in her heart, and she had a difficult conversation with him. But at the end, he said, I support you totally, because I trust you, and I want you as a partner who's going to give me some of that advice, some of that information that other people won't tell me. So it really paid off for her. But she was very nervous about basically disagreeing with him about some things. And I said, that's why he's got you there. You're an expert in this area. He wants that information.
So encouraging folks, what I hear you saying is encouraging folks to be themselves and have their own voice and share that with their workplace, right?
Exactly, yeah. And that doesn't mean being rude or arguing with people. You still have to think about that kind of stuff. But if you're coming from an authentic place and what you're saying is really what you believe in your heart, then that's what you need to do. Now, people might not necessarily agree with you. People might not necessarily give you what you're asking for. But by being open and expressing that, you're in such a much better place than keeping it hidden, and it's eating away inside you.
I love the title of your second chapter, folks. It says, Dissenters, Oddballs, and Mavericks Rule.
Yeah, well, Mavericks has got overused, but that's not my fault. But Mavericks got overused in the election. But yeah, I really believe that when you look at history, there are so many people who technically shouldn't have been successful. Greta Garbo had this incredibly strong Swedish accent. She started off in silent movies. Richard Branson, founder of Virgin Airlines, and also has Virgin Cola and different businesses, didn't graduate from high school. All these people who are really successful, who technically haven't followed the right pattern, are very different from other people. So I really like that, and it can be true for people in corporations, that they find their niche where their kind of uniqueness really works out.
You go on, that's great, and there's so many examples of that it almost makes you wonder who are the real outsiders, because the folks who are considered outsiders, they're the ones that are really making it happen in society, right? Yeah,
I think so. And I know that, and this may seem strange, but people get nervous about getting laid off, and I found that one of my stories in there is about someone who was an engineer and had a kind of passion for magic and all kinds of weird and wonderful things, and became an expert on creativity. And when there came layoffs, this person didn't get laid off because they were kind of unique. Now, if they'd have stayed just kind of doing their job as an engineer, they were just kind of an average engineer, probably would have got laid off, like all the other people who were just kind of doing their job and being kind of average. But because they had special skills and were teaching about how to think differently about problems, they were the ones who were kept. So it can really pay off in your career.
So either way, if you're kept, that's a good sign. If not, it's a sign for you to go match up with someone that's a better fit for you.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Yeah.
So when we come back from the break, we're going to continue. And David, I want you to take us down, chapters that talk about uniqueness and how to accept yourself. I thought these were just wonderful, great steps. I'm Gregory Foster. We're going to take a break here. You're listening to Access Zen. Have a wonderful morning.
And now, let's return to Access Zen.
Okay, so we're heading into the last leg of our segment today with David Couper here. And David, I really love your book because it really kind of brings out celebrating our uniqueness. And I think no matter where you are in the world, whatever culture you're part of, there tends to be this human condition of we've got to fit in. And I'm sure a lot of that was done for survival reasons, and I'm sure there's still lots of good reasons for us to want to adapt and be a part of a social group. That's a really good thing. But at the same point, we need to remember that we need to maintain our own individuality, and that's a good thing, right, David?
Exactly. I think so, too. And you're right, people did try and fit in, and sometimes it does make sense to try and fit in, but really standing out makes sense, and I just know that from my own experience and my own clients. And kind of the steps, I wanted to talk about the steps you go from an outsider to an insider, because there's really a process and really kind of things you can kind of hold on to, concrete things. So the first step is acknowledging you're an outsider, making sure that you've worked out in your own mind, and I give kind of like tips and ways of doing that you're different. And then being open to that being okay and being successful. So if you think about Oprah, you think about Donald Trump, you think about different people like that who have been successful, because I think sometimes people think, I'm different and I can't be successful. But yes, you can. And then assessing what makes you different. And I talk a lot about ways you can find out what makes you different. Things like getting a friend to interview you, and the friend telling you, what they think are some of your strengths, what they think some of the things that are different. I've had clients do that and been kind of blown away by what their friends or people who know them have told them about them. And then acknowledging, accepting that's all okay about you, and doing some kind of inner work, which I think you obviously talk a lot about on your program. Then looking at next step would be, well, what can I sell to an employer? Not everything that makes you different is something that other people are interested in, but certainly some of them will be. And then going through the normal kind of job hunt process, but you have to kind of focus on your uniqueness, and you have to put it in a positive way. So if you spent 2 years traveling around, I think that's great, but some employers won't think that's great. So you have to kind of you have to kind of present that in a way which is going to work. And then just keep focused and don't let other people or yourself derail you. So those are sort of the steps to go through from outsider to insider.
I love that first part. Let's talk about that again. So you videotape yourself with a friend and asking you questions kind of helps you find your own style and kind of see how others perceive you, right?
Right. So I had a client do that, and he talked to 8 people, and some of them knew him very well, some of them didn't know him so well, and he just said, and the rules are, and this is what he said, just tell me about your perception of me, what you think, good and bad. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just going to take notes. And so basically, they started telling him stuff, and instead of sort of saying, well, I don't agree with that, you're wrong about that, he just kind of, okay, I get that, yeah, and just made notes. And what they all came up with was that he was great at solving problems. He was really a good person to work with. They all liked working with him. But occasionally he would kind of lose his temper, get really upset, and that was uncomfortable for them. Everybody said that, all 8 people. So, it was just really good feedback for him, because he knew that in his heart, but he'd never really had anybody tell that. So we worked through, what was, as you talked about, the outer reflection being, the outer things being a reflection of the inner things.
Yes.
Why was he getting upset? Why he was getting upset? Because he was frustrated. Lots of different reasons. So we could work through that and kind of start to heal that. So now he can go back to those people and say, thanks for that feedback. I really want to work with you in the future. I get what you're saying about me getting angry. I'm not going to do that. So really, really good information for him.
So really, David, thank you for kind of like being the neutral observer in our own life in accepting, balanced feedback from others, right? That's a real key part.
Yeah. And I also I talk about the whole process in the book, but it's important that some people will give you stuff which is not valid, which is not useful. So you have to be able to say to yourself, okay, that's not really helpful to me. But at the time, you want to just be very gracious and open to whatever anybody says, and be okay with that. And then afterwards, you can then sort through. And if you find that all 8 people have said the same thing, you need to look at that. There's something there.
That's great. Well, David, I almost hate to say this, but we're getting close to the end of the show.
I thought we might be.
And I'm sad to say that, because I'm really enjoying this conversation with you. It's almost like the show needs to go on. It seems to happen every week now. But we're talking to David Couper, author of How to Create a Winning Career, Even When You Don't Fit In, Outsiders on the Inside. And the show was all about making your career dreams come true. And we've kind of been going into in depth on just really kind of scratching the surface here on finding our uniqueness and it being okay with ourselves and finding the right fit, right, David?
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
So how would the good listeners at home, how would they find you?
So I have a website, and it's www.davidcoupercoach.com, and Couper spelled with a U, so it's David, C-O-U-P-E-R, coach.com. And if you go there, you can find out more about me, find out more about the book. You can get some free download of chapters from the book, so if you wanted to check it out. And then there's all kinds of things about, resumes and, interviewing, everything about kind of job hunting, and some of the links to where I've been quoted on Forbes or Fortune and NPR and things like that.
Wonderful.
So, lots of good stuff.
And you're also an executive coach too, right? So they can hire you?
People can hire me, yeah, sure. And it gives information about services there. And if anybody's interested, then contact me and do 30 minutes free just to kind of find out what you want and what you need. People just going into college, people graduating from college, and people who are, seniors who are starting their third or fourth career. So all kinds of different people. It's great fun.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for being on the show, and I look forward to talking with you again. We'll probably maybe seek you out again sometime in one of our future shows when we have some career questions.
That'd be great. Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Wonderful. Really appreciate it. You take care now.
Thanks.